Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto had sided with Sand Village during the Konaha invasion part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button, check description and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. All eyes were glued onto the scoreboard as it continuously flashed names. By now, there were only 9 people left, meaning that there would only be 4 more matches and one person who was automatically advanced to the next level. Secretly, Lee thought that auto-advancing would be more painful than death. Finally, it came to a stop on 2 names. The Sand Village's Tamari and the Leaf Village's 1010. Youth Power, 1010. Lee and Guy shouted in unison, successfully embarrassing the girl with twin buns. They don't ever change, thought the 2 more conservative members of the year-old rookie team. Lee glanced across to the other side of the room where the Sand team was. They weren't doing their part in cheering their teammate on. Jerks. But Neji saw another thing. All 3 of the boys' eyes held the same thing. Assurance, confidence, and faith that their comrade would be the victor. If they were right, the match was already decided then. The match began quickly. 1010 tried throwing a few sharp weapons and missed for the first time in years. Tamari had dodged it using the same taijutsu she used when she trained with her instructor. A slight movement so fast it would appear to be an illusion. No person her age had been able to see through that the first time she tried it on them. So what would a hot-blooded Leaf Genin Kunoichi know? Then Tamari had revealed a purple Hoshi and told her that once 3 were present, she would lose. So then 1010 decided to use a technique involving 2 scrolls. And after taking a look at her teammates' faces, Tamari had discerned that this must be her ultimate technique, or whatever. It didn't matter. If this girl was trying to win by throwing weapons, she would most definitely lose. Her fan was the best at countering projectiles after all. And 1010 did her technique, looking quite flashy while doing so. But in the end, Tamari's wind-cutting blades prevailed, sending the Chinese. Is there a China in here? Girl's weapons falling to the ground uselessly and spearing the girl painfully onto the top of fan. Tamari then gave a smirk and tossed the girl aside, allowing her to be hurled straight into her dork of a teammate's arms. Then she said a snide comment of some kind and returned up the stairs where she was originally after she was declared the winner. Naruto and Kankuro probably would have caught what she was saying if they weren't so busy making jokes about the fight below. Oh, here, she'd say something like, "I'm not going to lose because I'm a blonde. It's a war between blondes and brunettes." Nah, you only hear stuff like that in the movies. Besides, that other girl's not a brunette. She has black hair. I thought we were making up movie lines. And her hair's kind of like a mix of black and brown. Her hair color doesn't matter. And we weren't making up movie lines. We were making dialogue. What's the difference? What's the difference between what? Ah, hi Tamari. What are you guys talking about? Nothing. Anything important? No. Were you paying attention to my match? Yeah, good. Kankuro, you're next. Huh, wah. Kankuro glanced up and just as Tamari said, his name was on the board along with another person, Inazaka Kiba. Wonder who he is. Kankuro muttered aloud as he left for the downstairs. Hopefully, this match would be quick and easy. Why'd he have to go now though? Naruto, what were you guys talking about? Suddenly, Kankuro was very happy that he was going next. After all, Tamari would wring their necks for not paying attention to the brilliance of her fight. Inazaka Kiba was, as his name implied, a dog boy. He even had a little puppy with him. Interesting, Kankuro thought as he laid Karasu down. Both have outside help. We're going to defeat this pig in a black suit, aren't we, Akamaru? His dog gave him an affirmative yelp. Pig? In a black suit? Pig. Kankuro felt his blood pressure rising but he quickly squashed it down. It would do him no good to lose his cool and it would do him no good to be the only Sand who failed to pass. Match. Begin. Yoshi. Akamaru. He tossed the dog a small object affirmed as a soldier pill. The little white dog swallowed it, and then the little white dog became a bigger red wolf-looking animal. Looks like Kiba wants to finish this match quickly. Kurenai thought. Beast effect ninpu. Beast human bunshin. Kiba shouted. Akamaru transformed into a human counterpart of his master. Here it goes. Quadruped no jutsu. The two charged at Kankuro, cracking bits of flooring along the way. Kankuro managed to dodge Akamaru easily, but failed to avoid Kiba. Kiba slammed into the sand nin, knocking him to the floor painfully. Second time, Akamaru. Kiba shouted gleefully, but the affirmative bark never came. Akamaru. The dog was, of all things, sleeping on the floor. Suddenly, a mechanical hand clamped down on his wrist. Well, is it my turn? A hand stuck out of the mummified object his opponent had put on the floor moments earlier. It gave a slight tug and the bandages came loose, revealing what was underneath. Kankuro. Dogs, especially pet dogs, are susceptible to any type of genjutsu, especially sleep. Kankuro said, getting up from under the wraps. And since you've been attacking the wrong thing. Kiba finally turned around to see what held his wrist prisoner and was shocked to find a mechanical eye staring into his. What the? Suddenly, even more arms wrapped around Kiba's body, arms, and neck. Then they began to squeeze. Forfeit. Kankuro said. Unless you want to die. Shit. Kiba thought as the mechanical arms tightened even more. I have to think of something or else. Ah. His wrist hand snapped. Stop the match. Hayate said quickly. Winner. Kankuro. Kiba-kun, will he be okay? Hinata asked. He's fine. Kurenai said. His wrist is broken. The way he yelled, someone would have thought he broke his nose or something. Shino grumbled. Shino. Kurenai reprimanded, to which Shino gave no response. He was, perhaps, a bit impatient, although his features gave away no hints. There were only 5 people left and he was the only one on his team who hasn't gone. So he was dying with suspense, even if it wasn't the most obvious thing in the world. Why can't that thing just choose 2 names randomly instead of flashing it so fast like that? So annoy. Shino, you're up. Well, stuff him with bugs and call him a freak. He actually got chosen. His opponent was a man named Sugiri Masumi. He was the other person on Yoroi's team. If his abilities were the same as Yoroi, then it would be no problem. After all, his Kekai bugs consumed all his chakra. So even if Masumi tried to touch him, there would be nothing to drain. Match. Begin. Immediately, Masumi threw a few punches at him, which he avoided easily. But as soon as Masumi was within range, his body suddenly elasticized and he clamped onto Shino, arms wrapped around him and constricting quickly. Forfeit now, or I'll have to break your neck. Masumi said. Suddenly, he felt an odd sensation. Like thousands of tiny little feet were crawling up his legs and slowly making their way up. He quickly released Shino and was horrified to discover that millions of bugs were making rapid progression toward his head. Aghh. Masumi screamed a scream that raised the question of his masculinity, but then again, when was a scream ever masculine? Then he began dancing around, attempting violently to shake off all the 8-legged intruders. You won't get them off that easily, Shino said as Masumi finally lost his balance and toppled to the floor. Most of them have probably gone under your skin. Ergh. Masumi wasn't sure if he could even muster out the words for forfeit. The bugs were draining his chakra faster than Yoroi ever could. When Hayate finally had the sense to stop the match, the bugs crawled off Yoroi, leaving behind a terrifying sight. There were holes in the man's skin. Dozens and dozens spread over his arms and legs. The Kekai bugs had done a thorough job in cleaning out his chakra. Neji, can you see what's in that boy? Guy asked. Neji gave an affirmative nod and focused his Byakugan on him. What he saw gave him a start. I can understand if he summoned them. Neji said. But there are bugs living within him. What? Lee asked incredulously. The Aburame clan. Guy thought. This is their successor. Lee was tense. Very tense. This was the absolute last match in the Chunin preliminary exam. He just had to be in it. He had to. By now, there was only him, the sound guy, and Yamanaka Ino. I have to be in this. He thought. I have to get revenge on him for embarrassing me in front of Sakura-san. If I don't make this, he vowed, I'll slam my head against the wall 100 times. Then I'll run 500 times around Konaha. The next match was between Kinuta Dosu and Yamanaka Ino. It proceeded only after an incident in which they had to restrain a bull-hair boy from smashing the wall with his head. Dosu smirked confidently. This girl thought she could avoid his attacks using earplugs. She was wrong. Ino was kneeled on the floor holding her ears painfully. His attack had been unexpected and had completely destroyed what remained of her balance. Now she was kneeling on the floor, but it didn't feel like she was kneeling on the floor. It was like she was sideways on a wall or something. And not to mention what was going on with her eyes. Dosu looked like he had hundreds of clones behind him. Suddenly, all of them dashed at her, and in that split second, she finally saw the true Dosu. Then his palm came in contact with her chin and the force knocked her into the wall. Winner. Dosu. Sandame looked at the group of genins before him this year. All of them were exceptional, and almost half of them were rookies. Very impressive. His gaze briefly passed over Uzumaki Naruto. The boy was standing in the back row and was having a conversation with another genin Sand, the one with a gourd on his back. He would have liked to ask the boy many questions. Why did you leave? What happened when you did? Where did you go? Who did you meet? But he found that he just couldn't. It was probably his negligence in enforcing the regard him as a hero rule that prompted the boy to run away in the first place. I would now like to begin explaining the main test. He said aloud, purposely avoiding eye contact with the former Leaf, and he was almost certain that Naruto was looking past him for a reason. It will take place in a month. During this month, shinobi leaders need to be informed and gathered for the selection. Of course, you will also use this time to rest and improve your bodies. Get the business over with, GG. Kankuro thought impatiently. Old geezers are always long-winded. I would like to dismiss you now, the Sandame started. Yes. But there has to be something done before that. No. There are pieces of paper in the box Anko's holding. Sandame said. Please take one. Each of them drew a piece of paper as the box came around. Then they were asked to repeat the numbers on the paper. You have just drawn numbers for the match arrangements of the finals. He said. That's what we drew them for. Ask the group of Leaf Genins, and Tamari. The matchups for the finals are, Ibiki said, Match 1, Uzumaki Naruto and Hyuga Neji. Match 2 Kinuta Dosu and Rock Lee. Match 3, Kankuro and Aburame Shino. Match 4, Tamari and Nara Shikamaru. Match 5, Gaara and Uchiha Sasuke. Then the Nara boy asked a question about the terms of passing the exams before they were, in Kankuro's words, finally dismissed. The four from the sand banded together and took off quickly. Kazekage-sama won't like it that you're in Sasuke's matches last. Naruto muttered quietly to Gaara. I don't care about what he thinks. Gaara muttered back. Right. You only care about what I think. If looks could kill, Naruto would be poisoned, burned, body parts ripped off by 5 raging horses in 5 directions, and buried 12 feet under. Tamari watched the blonde jest with her little brother. Uzumaki Naruto, supreme fool, king of the idiots, and the only person who ever jokes with Gaara on a daily basis. On second thought, he was the only person who jokes with Gaara. Period. Anyway, Naruto was saying, I found this great spot in the forest. It's right next to a river, so I'll be training there if anyone's looking for me. What for? Tamari asked. It's not like you need it. Speed and endurance. The three of them almost face-faulted. Naruto was the Sand's fastest genin and he once ran around Sunagakure 50 times without breaking a sweat. If he had to train at all, he should be working on strength training, not speed or endurance. But first, let's get a little something to eat. Naruto said. Raw. No. Tamari yelled, clocking him smartly over the head with the butt of her fan. Udon. Ew. Fat noodles. You've eaten nothing but ramen since you got here. I haven't eaten ramen in the last 5 days. Good. Get that stuff out of your system. Tamari grabbed the neck of Naruto's shirt and began to drag him to the nearest udon stand while Kankuro and Gaara trailed behind. In the end, they ended up eating at a chicken curry place, but eating a chicken curry place has little to do with this story, so let's move on now, shall we? It was a bright, early Saturday morning. The birds were singing happily and Konaha was just coming to life. Tamari hated it. The sun was too bright, the birds were too loud, and the people were even louder than the damn birds. No, she's not a pessimist. She just loves her sleep and hates the mornings. She rolled over and wrapped the cocoon of blankets around her even tighter. Kankuro and Naruto both insisted that the air conditioning be on full blast. Mainly because at home, they never got a chance to be good and cold. As she rolled over, she came face to face with a note. It read, "Training. Be back at around 5. Naruto. P.S. I won't eat ramen for lunch if that's what you're worried about. T." Tamari gave a little laugh and ran her fingers through her hair. How predictable. The spot Naruto found was indeed an ideal training spot. The river extended beyond what the eye could see and wasn't very deep. He could just run up and down on the water all day. Chakra control, speed, and endurance all in one. He was about to start when he sensed someone watching him. He hurled a kunai in the general direction of the someone. Don't get so mad, Naruto-san. It was Kurosaki. Aren't you supposed to regroup? What are you doing here? Kazekage-sama has new orders for you. Kurosaki said, tossing the kunai he threw at her back to him, this time with a slip of paper attached. Should I inform everyone else? Naruto asked. I said he had new orders for you. She replied, getting up to leave. I didn't say it was for anyone else. Naruto frowned as the sand nin disappeared into the trees. That was odd. He glanced at the piece of paper. There were only 3 simple words on it. Summon a Kyuubi. After reading that note, Naruto came to 2 conclusions. Either Kazekage-sama lost his mind, or Kurosaki was playing a joke on him. He settled on the first one. It was probably more likely that the snake man from the sound poisoned his mind. In fact, it was the snake man that orchestrated the entire attack. It was almost as if Kazekage-sama was just a puppet. No, he was not that stupid. Kazekage-sama could be deluded by his ambitions, but he was no fool. At least, that was what Naruto thought. You know, Kankuro said, if you'd only taken the Chunin exams last year, you would have made it with no problem. Now, it's too late. It's not like that, Tamari responded. It's not. Secretly, she had been surprised and a bit disappointed when she heard of the Konaha invasion. For one thing, she had nothing against this village. Another was that as much as she didn't want to admit it, she wanted to be a Chunin. If only it had been a year later. Naruto racked his head for a way to summon a 9-tailed fox. The logical thing would be, naturally, to ask the Kyuubi. But the last time he asked the Kyuubi to help him learn a summoning, the Kyuubi had told him to figure it out himself. Then he had to wait for a week while his pinky twitched uncontrollably before the Kyuubi would tell him anything. So after a few hours of thinking while running up and down the river, he finally came to the conclusion that he couldn't summon a Yoma without extra help. Summoning a demon was a dark art, and any sort of dark art in the shinobi world had to be developed or learned directly. Oi, Baka Kitsune, wake up. What do ye want, ye stupid brat? I need to learn how to summon a 9 tails. Single quote. Don't screw with me, ye little runt. Kyuubi growled. I'm not. I have to learn it in a month. Whatever the hell for, Gaki. Chunin selection exam. And don't call me that. Where in the rulebook does it say ye need to know how to summon a demon for a Chunin exam, Baka? Kazekage-sama wants me to learn it so I can use it then. Damn, Baka. This is going to take a freaking long time just for ye to learn the damn rules. There are rules for summoning demons. Go back to that pile of crap ye call a hotel, get a good night's sleep, and I'll start teaching ye tomorrow. Right. That means no more training for the rest of the day. What? Why aren't you training? Temari asked, surprised as Naruto burst in through the door. Didn't you say you'd be back around 5? Kage-sama wants me to learn how to summon a 9-tailed demon fox. Naruto said. Kyuubi said he'd teach me starting tomorrow, but that means I can't train for the rest of today. The two of them nearly choked on their coconut-flavored shredded ice. Summon a Kyuubi? Temari asked. Why? Naruto shrugged. To help with the attack is my best guess. He said honestly. He never thought to question why the Kage suddenly wanted him to learn how to summon Kyuubi. It wasn't his job to question orders. Does Baki know? Kankuro asked, just as Baki walked in the room. Do I know what? Kage-sama wants me to learn how to summon a Kyuubi Yoma in time for the attack. Naruto said. Baki was a bit surprised at the Kage's request. He hadn't known about it beforehand. Why did he suddenly want Naruto to learn how to summon a Kage-sama? You are a cruel man. Baki thought. You truly hate the Leaf's Sandaime Hokage with a passion, do you not? Using that kind of emotional attack. Baki-sensei, Naruto was saying, why do you think Kage-sama wants me to learn that? Baka. Baki said. Think about it. It's all meant to inflict pain of the Hokage. During the attack, the two of them will be isolated from the rest of the fighting. The Sandaime Hokage would be unable to help as the Leaf Nins fight the Kyuubi you supposedly summoned, just as he was unable to help with the Kyuubi Yoma from 13 years before. And being that you were the one who summoned it would cause even more grief because he was unable to protect you from the villagers 8 years ago. Naruto averted his gaze to the window. He had long since learned the difference between Hunter Nins and Anbu. But still, he never gave the Sandaime Hokage another thought until now. Baki watched his student closely. Even after monitoring him all these years, his student was still an enigma to him. Naruto was by no means violent nor was he bloodthirsty by nature. He tended to get a little of both when he was on a mission, but was otherwise pretty mellow. In fact, often, he was mellow to the point that called for some worry. But he always recovered from those phases fairly quickly. Hey Temari, look, Naruto said suddenly. Your opponent is going to that barbecue place again with the rest of his team. Nara? Temari asked, coming over to the window and taking a look out. Suddenly, a question dawned on her. Naruto, do you know Nara? Naruto was quiet for a moment. We used to be skipping buddies. He finally said. Me, him, the fat guy, and dog boy. I'm pretty sure he doesn't remember though. He added quickly. It might have been her imagination, but it seemed like whenever Naruto talked about his past, he always got a nostalgic look in his eyes. It must have been her imagination. Naruto has never once voiced any warm feeling toward the Leaf Village. And he wouldn't start now, especially in the middle of such an important mission. Oi, start teaching, Naruto said to the fox, ignoring the stupid annoying baka comments that issued naturally from the fox's potty mouth. Alright, first thing ye have to know is that when ye summon a Yoma of any kind, it's permanent. That is to say, they won't leave for any reason unless they die. The contract between the summoner and summoned is binding. So don't practice summoning just for the hell of it. Then how were you summoned? The fox emitted a sound that was a cross between a snort and a laugh, for short, a snaff. The jackass who summoned me couldn't control me. That's another thing, don't summon things that ye can't control. That's not a demonstration of power, that's just stupid. A Kyuubi is one of the most bloodthirsty Yoma tribes around. Ye lose control of them and they'll go wild, just like I did 13 years ago. Naruto thought. Never thought there could be rules for summoning demons. Well, there are, so shut up. He said before continuing. Ye can't practice how to summon, so just keep this in mind. To summon one, switch the first and second, third and last seals on the regular Kitsune summon. Oh, and use my chakra while summoning. What? Why? Ye want to go out in the middle of a night to pick lichen grass at the height of the full moon? No. Ye want to find a moonstone and carve it in shape of a fox. No. Ye want to collect toenails of a rabbit that's been dead for exactly 99 hours. No. Good. Then do what I say and use my chakra to summon. It's like one Kyuubi calling out to another. That'd how it works. Oh, I see. But what's with the lichen grass stuff? Summoning a demon ain't easy, Kuzo. So, I can't practice summoning. No. Naruto sighed. I guess it's back to training for me. He stood up and immediately sat back down again. His left leg felt like the feeling left behind after your foot goes numb. It'd probably stick around for a while too. He tried wiggling his toes. Good, at least he still had feeling there. Judging by that fact, it'd probably take him only overnight to heal up. It would have been a dark, desolate night had there not been a big bright full moon lighting the streets of the village. There were very few people still awake at this hour of the night. Gaara was one of them. He was always one of them. The Shukaku within him never allowed more than a few seconds of slumber. Why was it that Naruto, whose demon's strength was 10 times stronger, allowed the joy of sleep? Why could Naruto talk to his demon at will, while he was stuck with the loud and shrill voice of Shukaku? Why was Naruto so lucky? What's so special about Naruto's seal? Why? Shukaku stirred. Gaara closed his eyes, careful not to go to sleep. No, he would not be jealous. Naruto was his friend, his best friend. He was the only person who ever understood him. No, he would not be. You sure got me, do you not sleep? Gaara opened his eyes, then turned his glare upon the intruder. It was one of the shinobi from Otogakura, is that right? The man made some comment about wanting to fight Sasuke-kun. Gaara resisted the urge to give a sardonic laugh right there. The only person who would fight the Uchiha would be him, only him. He would be the last person Uchiha Sasuke ever fought, because he would destroy him. That Oto Nin, Kinyuta Dosu. He's a fool. He motionlessly uncorked his gourd, allowing sand to come out small bits at a time. The sound Nin doesn't notice, and only comes closer. Stupid fool. He gets excited during a full moon. Gaara finally says aloud, surprising the sound Nin. Moments later, the roof would be scarred with 3 slashes. In the middle of those 3 wounds was the body of Kinyuta Dosu, the one who foolishly challenged Gaara of the sand. You killed a Leaf Junin. Screw that, you killed the 3rd examiner. It was unavoidable, Baki said to his fuming student. He overheard the conversation between Kabuto and me. That's why you usually don't talk about top secret war plans in the middle of the night in the middle of a place where anyone can overheard you. Baki shot Naruto a glare that promptly put him back in his place. How's the summoning coming along? He asked. It's coming along okay. Naruto replied. The Kyuubi says I can't practice it though, because if I do, then whatever I summon won't go away. Baki nodded. It made sense. Summoning between regular animals and yomas were bound to have differences. What's the success % rate? Quote. About 75, I'd say. Only. Baki sighed. Guess it couldn't be 100% success if Naruto couldn't even practice. Either way, even if you do manage to summon one, you'd still need to fight with us. We have 29 days left. Make use of them. Yes, sir. Tamari wiggled out of the thick blankets expecting to find an empty space beside her. She was correct. Kankuro was snoring away like a pig and there was a neatly tied bedroll in the corner. She stuck her head out the window and took a deep breath. As much as she loved the sand village, she had to admit that the air was much better in Konaha. Here, you could inhale without getting your air passage clogged with sand. She saw the village come to life. The streets were empty, then slowly filled with its residents. This place was too peaceful. It was unaccustomed to war. It had forgotten about its violent past. Because of that, her father wanted to destroy that peace. In 1 month, this village that was so peaceful and prosperous would be nothing more than a smoldering ruin. She wasn't sure how she felt about having that knowledge. Naruto ran around Konaha for the 14th time that day. It wasn't very easy. Konaha was much bigger than Sunagakure. It was relatively easy the first 10 times, but afterwards, He glanced at his watch. It was noon on the dot. He'd stop for lunch in an hour. Naruto's training method was very simple. He didn't use weights or anything relative to weights. He trained for stamina, though he had more than enough, and in battle, stamina would make up for whatever speed he desired. It was training unique to him, because normal people would not be able to substitute speed for stamina. Thank the Kyuubi for yet another advantage. He finally stopped after the 20th lap and went back in the village. Tamari wasn't here, so he could devour all the ramen he wanted. And there was a little place he remembered that used to serve excellent ramen when he was still living in Konaha. He didn't know the name of the place, but he remembered where the place was. "Ohio," he called out as he lifted the flaps and entered the shop. It was still here after all, Ichiraku Ramen. The owner, Ichiraku, had not changed either. He and his daughter were still the cooks for the place. Ichiraku turned around and greeted Naruto after a split-second pause. "What'll it be?" the man asked. Naruto scratched his head. "The works, Oji-san." It might have been his imagination, but he saw Ichiraku's eyes wander down to his headband, which was tied around his arm. "Is there something wrong?" he asked. "No, nothing," Ichiraku responded, busying himself with the pot. "You just remind me of someone." Naruto nodded. At least he doesn't know exactly who he was. "So where you from?" Ichiraku asked. The stand was empty except for the two of them. It was 2:30 by now, and for most people, lunch hour was over. "I'm from Sunagaku," Naruto replied. "Chunin selection exam. From the Sand Village, EH. How's life there?" It was then that Naruto remembered how easy it was to talk to Ichiraku. When he was younger, Ichiraku was his only joy because the owner wasn't a shinobi, and therefore didn't know about him being the damned Kyuubi. As he walked away from the ramen stand, for the first time since the mission began, Naruto felt guilty. The next week was relatively uneventful. Naruto trained. Tamari and Kankuro moped around in the hotel room. And Gaara was off doing well. No one knew what he was doing. They assumed that he had locked himself in his hotel room and left it at that. It was quite a surprise one day when Baki rushed in their room and began berating them. Gaara wasn't in his room after all. "Your opponent fights using sand as a weapon," Kakashi was saying. "You've already seen his attack. But since you don't know how far the sand goes to protect him, you're going to have to be cautious." Sasuke panted. Kakashi was trying to teach him a technique called the Chidori, trying being the keyword. It was amazingly hard, mainly because his chakra control wasn't all that. It was probably the worst out of his teammates. Not that he would ever admit it though, no. Kakashi sighed. Sasuke never did try very hard at the tree climbing exercises when they were in the Mist Village. He had no reason to. Up until Haku joined the team, Sasuke was never motivated to do anything to perfection. He would try once and leave it at that. If only Sasuke had a rival of some sort, someone to provoke him and make him work harder. "I've already heard all I need to know about Gaara." Sasuke snapped irritably as the flare in his hand fizzled and died. "Tell me more about my other opponents." Kakashi raised his sole eyebrow. "Judging by your tone, you have someone in mind." Sasuke glared at him, as if asking him, "Do you even need to ask?" "Uzumaki Naruto. Why would you be curious about him? You saw his fight. It's not that." Sasuke took a deep breath and began focusing chakra in his hand again. "I've heard of that name somewhere. I don't know where, but I heard it before. And you know a hell lot more than you're telling us. So spill it, damn it." Kakashi sighed again. This is not the time or the place to be asking this question. And maybe Sasuke shouldn't be told at all. But oh well, to hell with it. Uzumaki Naruto used to be one of Konohagakure. The electric sizzle that Sasuke had finally managed to hold disappeared as quickly as it came. "What? Uzumaki Naruto used to live in Konoha?" Kakashi repeated. "One day, 8 years ago, he ran away from the village for reasons unknown. I would know. I'm one of the Anbu members assigned to retrieve him." Sasuke stiffened. He remembered that day. It had been Itachi's first mission as an Anbu and it was a failure. His father had rebuked his brother about it. Something about shame toward the Uchiha name. It was the first time Sasuke saw Itachi's eyes darken. But that wasn't it. There was something else about the blonde-haired blue-eyed boy from the sand that he couldn't put his finger on. There had been another incident, one that he couldn't remember. What was it? What happened? You can come out now. Your killing intent gives you away. Sasuke looked up, startled. It was his opponent, the other person from the sand, Sabaku no Gaara. Gaara gave Sasuke a brief look before abruptly turning his head and walking away. He doesn't seem very strong. Gaara thought. I was hoping he'd be more of a challenge. Cage had high expectations. Gaara smirked. Boy, was he going to be disappointed. I don't know why you're here. The silver-haired man said to him. But if you're trying to start something before the finals. Gaara stopped his walk away. He turned around and glared at the Uchiha boy. I will kill you. Naruto stared at the swirl of chakra in his hand. This time it had the distinct shape of a blob. He sighed. No matter what he did, he couldn't shape it into a definite shape. Expelling chakra was no problem at all, molding it was the problem. His supposed spear was nothing more than a line of chakra. That kind of expulsion was easy for anyone who has even a little speck of chakra control. But molding it into a shape while expelling large amounts of it was another story altogether. But this was his best technique. It didn't need any seals, just chakra. And since he always had trouble remembering the order of seals, this was his kind of jutsu. Now if only he could learn how to control it. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound above him. He snapped his head up. There was an old man crouching on the tree branch above him and he was staring at the swirl in his hand. Hey, boy, the man said, mold that into a ball and see what you get. With that, he bounced away. And I do mean bounce. Naruto blinked. What a weird man. He wasn't even wearing an actual headband. Who wears one with the kanji, oil, on it? He shrugged. Why not? He didn't know why he would just listen to a weird old man who evidently needed a comb. And a haircut. And a washcloth wouldn't hurt either. But anyway, it wouldn't hurt to be able to mold it into a sphere. It would probably be beneficial. After all, a sphere would probably be harder to shape than anything else. So logically, if he could do that, then he could do anything. Alright, sphere it is. 3 hours later, the door to the hotel room slid open and a puddle of flesh, bones, and blonde hair fell to the floor unceremoniously. Naruto, what happened to you? I was a stupid idiot. I used up too much chakra. It was in trying to get back here. I hate old men. My hair hurts. I'm not sure how dead head cells can hurt, but they sure as hell do. I hurt. All that came out was, hands, burn, ouch. Baki resisted the childish urge to box Naruto's ears. Enlighten me, he said, since when did you start taking advice from a strange old man who happens to be a stranger? He gave pretty good advice. Naruto replied, realizing just how incredibly lame he sounded. His teacher then had to resist another urge, this one to roll his eyes. And he was the one who taught this brat. So what he say? He told me to try and make it into a sphere. Oh, why sphere? Naruto shrugged, then winced. I just assumed that if I could turn it into a ball, it'd be easy doing anything else. Baki nodded. A sphere's supposedly the hardest to mold because of its shape. Since it had no corners, in order to retain the shape, the chakra would have to spin at an almost uncontrollable rate. And there would have to be enough power to control too. Maybe that old man was smarter than they gave him credit for. It took a grand total of 3 days for Naruto to give up. After another 2 nights restless sleep, he chucked the idea out the window. Screw it. He had more important things to do than just sit around trying to make a chakra ball because some guy said to try it. That day, he took out one of the scrolls he had allegedly borrowed from the Cage's library. Hey, Cage-Sama's too busy being a Cage to notice that one scroll is missing out of the hundreds of scrolls he had in his library. The first one listed said, Is a taijutsu technique where the ninja drives their fist into their opponent while they are on the ground, crushing them and grinding them into the earth. With impressive strength, this technique could be quite devastating. That could be really useful. Naruto thought gleefully, happy that he swiped this one instead of the other one with black wrapping. Taijutsu had always been his favorite type of fighting. Let's go, he thought, cracking his knuckles. This would take a lot of trees. Hope the Fire Country won't blame him for making a small part of their forest disappear. Ha! The tree trunk burst open, bark flying in all direction. Naruto grinned, almost maniacally. He did it. A record time of 5 days, too. Actually, more like 4 days. But he spent another day unnecessarily, perfecting it. He looked around him carefully. Since he's began, he's decimated about 45 trees. Crap, have to find a new training spot tomorrow, he thought, running back towards the village. Hope they don't suspect me. As he headed back to the hotel, he drew out the scroll. There's got to be another technique in here that can occupy me for the next 15 days. He thought. Ninjutsu, 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 genjutsu, ninjutsu, fuin. No more taijutsu. He sighed. The only taijutsu techniques remaining required Temari's fan. Maybe I can get Baki-sensei to teach me something. Suddenly, something caught his eye. Haosho a taijutsu technique where the ninja palm strikes their enemy, hurling them away. With impressive strength, this technique could be quite devastating. What? That's not even a technique. Naruto thought. Then he shrugged. Oh well, if it's listed, then it's good. Haosho actually took less time than his Ho. Which was expected because it wasn't much of a move. Naruto sighed. Personally, he hated anything with seals because he's always had trouble remembering the seals unless it was something important, like summoning. He took out the other scroll, hoping there was something worth learning. He was lucky. Kanashibari no Jutsu, a ninjutsu technique where the ninja stares down their opponent, causing them to become completely frozen in their tracks. Perfect for escaping a dire situation, or for stalling a target in an assassination. Anbu technique. Naruto grinned. This could be really useful. It was the night before the finals, the night before the invasion. The 4 sand nins were lounging around in the hotel room. That night, Naruto had convinced Gaara to stay and chat in the same room as them before he went out moon gazing. And Gaara had agreed. You didn't master Kanashibari no Jutsu, Naruto? Temari asked. Naruto shook his head. It's really hard. It usually helps if you have special eye bloodlines. And besides that, you need a target. And if you do it wrong, you can lose your eyesight. So I think I'll just stick with the other jutsus I already have. He turned around to address Gaara. Hey, Don, lose your head tomorrow. Gaara gave him a look that would have effectively turned anyone into stone. Nani ka? I know you. Naruto said. You change into another person when you get into a really heated fight. And I know you've been monitoring the Uchiha, and I know you know he's gotten a lot stronger. So, don't lose it. That's all I'm asking. Gaara wordlessly got up. He didn't bother asking just how Naruto knew these things. He walked toward the window and opened it. Just before he left, he heard Naruto call after him, that means not transforming before the signal. Neji tied a new layer of replacement bandages around his arms. Tomorrow, he would fight Uzumaki Naruto, the nin from the sand. From what he had seen, the sand team had wiped the floor with their opponents in the preliminaries. Every person in this world is born with an inescapable destiny. He thought, repeating the mantra again in his head. If I am meant to win, then so be it. Yes, yes, yes. I will win the first match tomorrow, and then I'll fight either Uzumaki-kun from the sand or Neji. And with my trump card, I cannot lose to either of them. Yoshi, I will win. How do you guys think you'll do in your matches tomorrow? Naruto asked. Kankuro, you'd probably have to forfeit if the signal's not given before your match, right? Yay. Kankuro grumbled. So, Temari-san, how do you think you'll do? I'm fighting a guy who's gone to the barbecue almost every single day for a month. I think I'll be fine. Whatever you say. Naruto chuckled. I don't know though. From what I remember, Shikamaru was a lazy bum, but he's pretty smart. Smart? Yay. Whenever we skip school, he always knows what place the teachers won't look when they're looking for us. I merit that as smart. Tamari snorted. That didn't sound like a very good reason for calling someone smart. All I'm saying is be careful, alright? Then Naruto rolled over and unfurled his sleeping bag. I'm going to sleep. We got a big day tomorrow. And we better get some rest, aight? The two others nodded, and within minutes, the lights were out and the room was silent. It was almost time for the finals to start. The only question was, where is everybody? Lee was looking around, almost desperately. Everyone was here except for Sasuke and his opponent. This could not be happening. He had trained for the last month and now Dosu wasn't here. What's with that? Listen up everyone. The new examiner was a middle-aged man with something sticking out of his mouth. Gekko Hayate had looked sickly. This guy just looked annoyed. I'm Shiranui Genma, your new examiner. He said with an almost bored tone of voice, the other one isn't available right now. I'll bet. Naruto thought. There are some new arrangements for the finals. Genma continued, holding up a piece of paper. Please take a look at the chart and confirm your new matches. The chart read that Naruto and Neji would go first, followed by Haku and Lee, then Kankuro and Shino, then Tamari and Shikamaru, and lastly, Sasuke and Gaara. Upon seeing this turn of events, Lee's brows rose a few inches. Where was Dosu? He wanted to get revenge. But, he glanced at his new opponent, Haku. From what he heard, this boy was a former Mist Nin and had transferred over to the Leaf after a mission involving Team 7. He had seen his speed and knew that there was much more power in him. Suddenly, he didn't care about Dosu quite as much as he did. Naruto looked around. Where was Sasuke? He knew that Gaara and Sasuke's match would be highly anticipated. Of course, the wait for his match was no less intense, but the difference was that their match was first and both of them were here. He glanced over at Gaara, who was shaking slightly, eyes wide open and slightly glazed over. If Naruto knew Gaara as well as he thought he did, then Gaara was talking to his mother. He better not release Shukaku before the signal. Naruto thought. They waited for another 5 minutes before Genma was finally given the signal to begin the first match. Will everyone clear the field so the first match can begin? Genma said, somehow making his question sound like a statement. As the Genins cleared the field, a loud cheer erupted from the crowd. Sakura and Ino looked around as the roar surrounding them suddenly rose in several volumes. Most of the people sitting around them were Sand Nins and Leaf Nins. It sounded like they have been waiting for this match for a long time. Sakura distinctly heard a voice next to her say something about the Hyuga and the demon. Demon. Did you hear that? She asked Ino, not bothering to lower her voice since no one could hear them anyway. Hear what? Someone said. Never mind. Where's Sasuke-kun? It's about to begin. Hyuga Hiyashi was one among the spectators and also noticed the sudden, almost happy, yells coming from the Sand Nins who were sitting around him. He glanced at the two Genins who were about to begin. One was his nephew. The other was a Sand Nin. There was something special about that boy. He radiated power. He didn't voice it because his daughter, his only daughter, Hanabi was sitting next to him and he wasn't about to say anything positive about a person from another village while Hanabi was still at such an early stage of her development as a shinobi. No, not as a shinobi, as a Hyuga of the main family. Neji looked at his opponent up and down, trying to find out as much as he could without the use of his Byakugan. The only other color on Naruto besides black was orange, an orange trenchcoat on black shirt, unevenly cuffed pants, and sandals. His Hittite was tied around his neck and there were bandages wrapped around what skin was showing on his right leg. And from this he could conclude, nothing. His eyes betrayed nothing. Neji could feel no contempt, anger, superiority, or nervousness from him. This was odd. Even himself, easily the calmest of all Konoha genin, was feeling a bit excited at such a high adrenaline-pumped battle with a crowd and everything that came with it. But he looked like a picture of serenity. What kind of shinobi did the sand produce? Begin the match, Genma said, jumping out of the way. The fight began quickly. The two on the field dove at each other without hesitation, each landing a test hit, then jumping back, each evaluating the other's strength quickly through that one hit. Neji had felt power. Naruto was strong in terms of raw strength, but that one hit wasn't enough to decide his overall ability. It would take a few more hits to determine how he was to defeat this sand shinobi. Naruto, on the other hand, already figured out Neji's fighting style. Even before Neji's punch connected, Naruto felt pain. He then concluded that in order to have received pain before actual contact, Neji must have expelled chakra from his hands, just like Hinata. The only difference was that Hinata was hitting randomly. Neji seemed to have some sort of pattern. He was hitting areas near Naruto's pressure points. Besides that, there was something wrong with the area where he was hit. The chakra didn't feel right. Naruto knew his own system well enough so that if something went wrong, he would be aware of it. His conclusion was that Neji was somehow manipulating his chakra flow by expelling his own into Naruto's body. All that through one hit too. Now that he knew what was happening, he had to find some way to counter it. He wasn't too worried about missing the signal since it was unlikely that they would move so quickly. Kage-sama was especially interested in Uchiha Sasuke, so they would probably see the fight between him and Gaara before the signal was given. Neji came at him again, this time even quicker. His speed was very impressive, seeing how he didn't have any inner demonic enhancements. Naruto was able to dodge each hit, but just barely. Looks like Konoha did have some extraordinary ninjas. Shit, Naruto thought, I have to think of a way. He's too fast for me to go with the usual hit and run. And those eyes of his, I don't know the full extent of their capability. Bad. He thought back to a scroll he had read up on around 2 months before. It was one on different genjutsus of the leaf. There was one in particular that caught his eye. Kokuangyo no Jutsu, otherwise known as the Bringer of Darkness technique. It was a skill unique to the Shodaime of the Leaf Village. He had tried to mastering it, and though it was far from perfect, it would have to suffice for now. He clasped his hands together, molding chakra while still avoiding Neji's attacks, and then he formed seals as quickly as he could and said, Kokuangyo no Jutsu. To the bystanders, it looked like someone had turned off a light in the stadium. 1 second, the two were having an impressive match, the next, it was just dark. This earned some boos from the audience, but for the more advanced shinobi, this was a surprise. This technique, Sandaime thought, belongs to Shodaime-sama. How did? Kage-sama was also wearing a somewhat surprised expression. He had heard that Uzumaki Naruto was a strong shinobi. But he had not expected him to use a cage-level genjutsu. Meanwhile, in the arena, Naruto had created a cage bunshin and was charging at Neji. Neji, even with his amazing eyes, could only see two powerhouse of power charging at him, full speed. He was certain that he could dodge the first few hits, but what would happen if he left an opening? Damn, he thought. How did I switch from offense to defense so quickly? Naruto knew he was being reckless. It was characteristic of him to lose his head if he couldn't finish a battle off quickly. This match was already dragging out longer than it should have. He and his clone were both trying their best to try and damage Neji, but were landing minimal amounts with minimal damage. This was bad, both jutsus were chakra consuming and he needed all the chakra he could get. He didn't want to rely on the Kyubis because he needed that for the invasion while having some of his own in stock. Shit, he thought as Neji finally dispersed his cage bunshin. Looks like his eyes can see the chakra. This jutsu is useless. If only I could do it perfectly, he wouldn't be able to see anything. He sighed as he released the illusion, cursing himself on his talent in the field of genjutsu. Neji was surprised when the darkness became light again. Secretly, he was relieved. He would have been a goner if he didn't have the Byakugan. He could not lose. The Hyuga destiny forbade defeat. His chakra was about half gone. He had to think of something that would turn the match around, but it looked like Uzumaki Naruto had more chakra in reserve than he did. The Byakugan was also constantly leeching off what remained of his stamina, but he couldn't afford to turn it off. Nah. Neji looked up. This was the first thing Naruto had said the entire time. What? Why do you think you're going to win? Neji was a bit taken aback. Usually, you don't ask questions concerning victory while fighting an opponent in a setting that concerned crowds in a stadium. He narrowed his eyes. What was Uzumaki Naruto trying to pull? Destiny. He said. Destiny will decide who wins. And destiny is always on the Hyuga side. Naruto waited for more, but there was nothing else. Destiny. What kind of destiny did he have? He sighed. Then, he gave a little snort that turned into a little chuckle, which eventually became a laugh. Neji glared at him. What? Naruto's laughter rang for a few moments more before he settled down. He didn't know why he found that answer funny. It just struck something in him. Destiny? He asked. That's your reason for fighting? He ha-ha-ed a few more times before unexpectedly sobering up. You actually believe in that load of crap? Neji bristled. Each person is born with an unchangeable destiny. He started, unwittingly spouting all the Hyuga talk he had been taught continuously throughout his entire life. A genius will always be a genius. A failure will always be a failure. A Konaha shinobi will always be a Konaha shinobi. At this last statement, Naruto burst into another bout of uncontrollable laughter. How coincidental that Neji would mention that last one. Originally, he had asked that question so he could buy some time and recover some chakra. Now, tell me, Hyuga-san. Naruto said, what does your destiny say about a traveler with no intention of returning home? Then, without waiting for an answer, he disappeared and Neji felt indescribable pain right beneath his collarbone. Just before he lost consciousness, he heard a voice say, just so you know, I used to live in Konaha. His method of victory was incredibly cheap. First off, the opponent was off guard. Second, he wasn't supposed to risk everything on one move like that. It was a combination of Isho and Hasu. Slamming the heel of your palm against your opponent to knock him upward, then a second hit that would smash them into the ground. And it also took a ridiculously large amount of chakra to reach the speed he needed to avoid any possible counter-attack. Oh well. The most important thing was that he won and would probably have enough time to recover from whatever chakra he unnecessarily wasted. What was that? Ino, apparently, unlike the rest of the spectators, hasn't caught on to what just happened. The Sand Nin's speed was inhuman. There was no earthly way that he could have moved that way. They could see the blur, but that only served to make it even more unbelievable. Sakura, on the other hand, was pondering just what did he do, exactly. She had clearly seen 2 hits, and only 2 hits. It should take a whole lot more to knock someone out unless the attacker was just that strong. He's not a genin, she thought. That she was sure of. There was no way on earth Naruto could be a genin. Lee was amazed. It was the first time he had seen Neji lose in terms of speed. Simply amazing. Uzumaki Naruto, he thought. I want to fight you. The Sandaime Hokage watched the boy make his way off the field. During the entire month, he was thinking on how to approach the boy, how to send for him so they could have a talk and clear up whatever happened 8 years ago. Ever since the Anbu came back empty-handed, he had wondered whatever happened to Uzumaki Naruto. He sent out messengers to every country, from the Stone Village to the Sand Village to the Mist Village. None of them were conclusive. Now he knew the Sand had been the ones who had been taking care of him, but by now it was too late to demand for his return. He was officially registered as a Sand Nin and there would be no changing that. He could also never figure out why Kazekage would lie about not having Naruto in custody. 8 years ago, they had searched his apartment for some kind of clue and they couldn't find any. The only sure thing was that night, Naruto was in bed, then got up, went straight out the door, walked down the streets to Ichiraku, then vanished. How did he vanish? No one knew. Sandame had his own theories that perhaps it was the Kyuubi who initiated the flight because Naruto's disappearance was too clean for a 5-year-old to accomplish. But without proof, it was just another guess. Back to the present, he had wanted to have a talk with Naruto. But throughout the entire month, there was the ever unanswered question, just what could he say? He couldn't just come out and ask him why he ran away. He couldn't openly tell him to meet with him either because it defied Chunin examination etiquette. In fact, the Chunin exam didn't allow him any contact at all with a genin from a rival village. He would have to wait until the exam ended before he could get any answers. What took you so long? Temari snapped as her teammate appeared next to her. Sorry. Naruto replied easily. Temari usually got really nervous before a big mission and generally took her nervousness out by picking on him and Kankuro. And since this was the biggest mission up to date, they'd probably lose a layer of skin off the top of their heads by the time Gaara fought. The next match would probably be between Haku and Rock Lee. If Shikamaru was anything like Naruto remembered, he'd probably surrender. Haku was the guy who fought in the first round and won by default because the other person was stupid enough knock himself out. So they couldn't really judge his ability yet. By now, Naruto was pretty certain that Haku was from the Mist Village. His clothing was a dead giveaway. As for the other one, Rock Lee, all he could figure out was that this guy needed to lay off the sugar, or whatever it was that made him so hyper. And his sensei didn't help either. In fact, his sensei probably encouraged his exuberance, thus making it worse. Rock Lee didn't get a chance to fight during the preliminaries even though he had shown the greatest desire to fight. He did look ecstatic though. His disappointment over finding out that he would not be facing Dosu in the second round had worn off quickly. This one should be interesting. Kill them. Give me blood. I want some food and the last time I ate was horrible. I'm thirsty for blood, Gaara. Gaara winced and rubbed his head. Quickly, he turned and walked from the viewing area into another hallway. I'll give you some fresh blood very soon, mother. He muttered as softly as he could. Please give me a moment. I want it now, you impudent boy. She shrilled in his head. Give me blood now. Hearing someone shriek in your head was completely different from hearing someone shrieking in your ear. It completely shook your mind, leaving you reeling, and the resonation was much worse. There was no blocking the sound either. I promise I'll give you blood later. He begged silently. And I promise it will taste very good. Just please. Fine, she snapped. But I want it soon. And I especially want to taste the one of that Kyuubi boy. Naruto. Yes, she hissed. I want to taste the blood of a demon. And I want it soon. The presence disappeared though the aftermath was still present. Mother hadn't always expressed an interest in Naruto before. He turned his heel and stalked back toward the viewing hall. Having another talk. Gaara turned his glare on the person speaking. He didn't hear him come in. You know Gaara, she's not your mother. Naruto said, following him back to where Kankuro was probably surrendering to Shino. That's just a twisted representation from Shukaku of your mother. Shut up, he snarled, walking faster and silently thankful when Naruto stopped following him. Don't lose it before the signal, Gaara. Naruto finally said, but he only received a glare before the vessel of Shukaku disappearing from the blonde's eyes. You surrender? The replacement examiner sounded dubious. Kankuro nodded. I surrender. Your loss, Genma said. Then will Nara Shikamaru in. I surrender too. Shikamaru called out hastily. Temari was already reaching for her fan and at that moment, looked particularly menacing. Genma managed to squash the instinct of eye rolling. 2 forfeits, one from sand and one from leaf. Not much of a crowd pleaser if you asked him. But it didn't matter. After all, most people were here to watch the fight between Uchiha and Gaara. With the 2 forfeits in a row, it only took a matter of seconds for Lee to realize, much to his happiness, that he would be fighting next. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to win this because I have the desire to prove that you don't need to be genius to defeat one. This was the chant Lee had been repeating through his head for the past month. He had gone on and tripled his original training. He was confident that he'd win against Dosu, but now he was facing Haku, who he knew nothing about besides the fact that he used Senbon acupuncture needles in attack. Start the match. Once given the okay, Haku sprang back, and the second he did, the entire fighting grounds began misting up. Nani? Lee glanced around him, startled. How did he create mist without moisture? And he didn't see Haku perform any seals either. What just happened? What's going on? Ino yelled angrily along with the rest of the spectators. After all, mist meant that there wouldn't be a match to watch. She calmed down a few milliseconds later and thought up a question. She turned on Sakura. How'd he do that? Ino asked. There's not a drop of water down there. That's his bloodline ability. Sakura answered. Lee-san can't win this. You sound real confident in him. I am, Sakura replied. When they went to the Mist Village a little over 6 months ago, she didn't expect to lose a teammate and gain a new one. The four of them, Kakashi, Sasuke, her and Aozumi, had gone to the Mist Village after Aozumi had complained loudly in front of the Hokage that they weren't getting any important missions. When they had gone, they first encountered a demon named Zabuza. Kakashi barely managed to defeat him the first time around. The second time, they met his servant, Haku. They split up into 3 teams. Kakashi was paired off with Zabuza, Sasuke and Aozumi fought Haku, and Sakura was left behind to protect their client. The battles were short and very bloody, and the end only came after Aozumi's death. As soon as Kakashi heard the body of his student fall to the floor, he unleashed everything he had at Zabuza, defeating him, but just barely. Both Kakashi and Sasuke were heavily injured, and if Haku had wanted to, he probably could have killed them right then and there. But Haku had lost his will to fight after seeing his master dead. What good was a tool if it didn't have a master? When they returned to Konaha, Haku went with them, although whether he was a prisoner or otherwise wasn't decided. It was decided by the Hokage that Haku would join Team 7, even though the idea was ludicrous. It wasn't a very good matchup either, and the team couldn't work efficiently because of the horrendous difference in ability. Haku was older in age and much better than Sasuke in everything from speed to stamina. And since Sakura couldn't even compete with Aozumi, who was worse than Sasuke, you get the idea. And Sasuke also tried harder when Aozumi was here because at least he was given an opponent even if the opponent was weaker than him. When Haku replaced Aozumi, Sasuke had to settle for being the worse off half of the rivalry, and even if he appeared to want to try and turn it around, Sakura thought that subconsciously, Sasuke had just given up. Haku's ability was to manipulate water into ice, but with a little help from Kakashi-sensei, who surprisingly knew a large number of mist jutsus, he eventually learned how to manipulate water in general. Now, for instance, he performed rapid condensation on the moisture in the air, turning it into mist. And with his added bloodline ability, he could do it without any seals. Go Haku! She shouted over the cries of the crowd. 6 months ago, Haku had literally been a faceless enemy. Now, he was her friend, and a kind, gentle friend at that. Often, it seemed like he was the glue holding them together and the one keeping Sasuke's ego in check. There was a stinging pain in his left arm. Lee quickly closed his hand over the thin, sharp piece of metal. It was a needle, he confirmed. If Haku was planning on attacking him under the cover of his mist, there wasn't a whole lot Lee could do about it. But he could guess Haku's position from the direction the needles were coming from. All he had to do was wait for the next one. But the curious thing was that the next few attacks came in pairs, one stabbing his right shoulder and one landing near his left toenail. Both came at exactly the same second and were in opposite directions. He had to be attacking from above then. Lee immediately gathered strength in his legs, and jumped up, clearing the mist by a few feet. From his view, he could see that the entire fighting grounds were covered in heavy fog, and that there was no way he could see anything. Then it was a matter of seconds before gravity pulled him back into the dense prison of fog. Since then, he was basically helpless. He did the only thing he could do. He closed his eyes and hoped his ears were good enough to hear the whoosh of flying needles and hoped that he would be able to move fast enough to avoid getting injured. Guy strained his eyes, making an overall futile attempt to see through the haze created by Kakashi's student. He had heard about Haku from the more gossipy Junins of Konaha. From what he had heard, Haku was from the mist and had the mindset that shinobi were tools drilled into him at a very young age. He was also the last of a nameless clan with the bloodline ability of manipulating liquid, and Kakashi had openly stated that Haku could probably best him in battle. It was horrible that Lee's opponent had to be one with such a naturally advanced talent. Lee. Haku watched Lee wince as yet another needle pierced his body. At first, the bull hair boy pulled them out, but after a while, there were too many and were coming too quickly for him to have time to take them out. Now he was beginning to look something like a porcupine. What's odd was that Lee wasn't using any techniques for counter. The only movements coming from him were jumps and flips to avoid the needles he could sense. Otherwise, he was basically a sitting duck. Yes, he did throw random punches here and there, but Haku would just jump out of the way with ease. Here was a prime example of someone who relied heavily on his gift of sight to fight. For the past few minutes, Haku had been aiming at Lee's vital spots, but Lee actually moved quickly enough so the needles missed. There was no doubt that he was in pain, but not in as much pain he would be in if the weapons had struck the desired target. The original idea was to hit the areas that would cause the most pain, but Lee-san was doing too well even if he couldn't see. The mist technique, no matter how advanced he was, also expended a large amount of chakra he couldn't afford to waste. He'd have to move quickly if he wanted to have a quick win. He transferred 3 needles to his right hand and aimed. Gomen, Lee-san, he thought. The arena began clearing up, much to the short-lived delight of the crowd. It was quite obvious that the match was over by then. Rock Lee was lying on the ground, face down and lifeless. Genma rushed over without delay and examined him. 3 needles had pierced his body. One was just under his collarbone, one was the mirror of the first, and one went straight through the center of his chest. The last one just barely missed hitting the area where the heart and lung met. Had it punctured just a millimeter higher. The examiner glanced at Haku, who was seated on the ground, panting lightly. Remarkable that he was able to aim so precisely even though he himself was enveloped in his own jutsu. Winner, Haku. Sakura gave a sigh of relief as the winner was announced. He won. She cheered silently in her head. See, she bragged to stupid Ino pig. I knew he'd win. Ino snorted. You didn't know what was going on either. She snapped back humorously. And he's stronger than you too, Sakura big forehead. Suddenly, Ino realized that she had struck a major nerve as Sakura's head suddenly delved deep between her arms. Oh gosh. Sakura, I'm so sorry. Guy ignored Ino's desperate, yet successful efforts to get Sakura's forgiveness. The match was horrible, not because Lee lost, but because it didn't give him a chance to show his true powers. The unfairness of it all, why couldn't Lee be born a genius? You see that? Kankuro and Naruto nodded. A small white puff going off on the roof of the opposite building above all the spectators wasn't that hard to miss. The 10-minute warning. Tamari began pacing again. It's about to start, she muttered nervously. Only 10 more minutes. The roar from the audience was getting louder and louder and the pit of worry in Naruto's stomach was growing deeper and deeper. Where the hell was Uchiha? Was it not enough that the cages were putting everything on hold just for him? Did he have to be late to such a ridiculous degree? Bastard. He would start pacing had he not known that pacing would just make his 2 siblings even more nervous. Gaara was already waiting on the field and had on his mask of apathy, but it was so very evident to the 3 sand nins that the control over his chronic schizophrenia was slipping rapidly. Uchiha Sasuke better get here soon. If he doesn't, then Gaara would transform before the attack. If Gaara tried to transform before the signal, all hell would break loose and they couldn't afford that. There was a movement in the audience where the fake Anbu was. It'd be either Kabuto or Yashimaru. Baki was probably outside the village sending for the two-headed snake along with the other Junins. From what he knew, the snakes would always demand a sacrifice in return for services. All the more incentive to win, for if they failed, the snakes would more than likely devour those it was allied with. He took a deep breath, trying to remember the order of events that were to take place. First, Gaara would have to transform while Naruto summoned the Kyuubi to guard him in case someone managed to break the shell. After Shukaku transformed, the only thing left to do was to wreak utter havoc on the village. Kazekage-sama and Orochimaru would take care of the Hokage. The Hokage. Crap. There's that thing called guilt again. Damn Uchiha. Sasuke did eventually arrive minutes after when his match should have started. Had he been anyone else, he would have been disqualified long before he and his silver-haired Junin sensei appeared in a storm of wind and leaves. But sadly, he wasn't anyone else. He was Uchiha Sasuke, the boy Kazekage-sama has been extremely partial toward in the last half-month or so. His sudden interest in him was questionable, but then again, Naruto was not one to question orders. Personally, he could not understand why Uchiha was so special. From what Gaara had told him, Uchiha was grossly overrated. Kankuro could probably take him. Gaara had said a few weeks ago after getting berated by Baki for his little, scouting mission. I don't see what all the fuss is about. Unless Uchiha had magically cleaned up his act, he'd probably die before the attack even began. Begin, the proctor said, jumping back to provide adequate space for the long-anticipated clash that was to happen. The words were scarcely out of Genma's lips when Gaara suddenly lurched forward, head clutched tightly between his hands. Please. He strained out, ignoring the dumbfounded expression on Sasuke's face. I fed you some nasty blood earlier, I'm sorry. But this time, it will be delicious. Oh no. Conversation has begun. Naruto glanced down worriedly at his friend. If Gaara lost control before the outside could start the attack, all hell would break loose. He was about to shout something to calm Gaara down when the other boy's face unexpectedly resumed its unbreakable mask of nothingness. Let's go. The fight began as any other fight would. There was the customary first round of shurikens thrown by the challenger that was, of course, easily intercepted by Gaara's shield of sand, which abruptly turned into a clone of its user. For the next few moments, Sasuke would do battle with the sand clone instead of his real opponent. Naruto had to admit that Sasuke improved vastly over the span of 1 month, but even with that improvement, he did not have the ability in him to defeat Gaara. He was fast, but not fast enough. He was strong, but could not possibly penetrate the shield. At the moment, Uchiha disappeared. In the same second, Gaara was unceremoniously knocked off his feet and into the ground. What the hell? Suddenly, the roles were reversed and Gaara became the rag doll in the hands of a powerful opponent. Sasuke's attack was so fast the shield only prevented the heaviest hits from connecting. The only flaw noticeable was that the speed was taking an unusual amount of energy to produce. Still, if this attack kept up, then there could be a problem. How could Sasuke get so strong in such a short time? Maybe Gaara had him pegged wrong. Gaara stood up from the bed of sand. He clasped his hands together and the sand began packing into a sphere with him inside. No, not that jutsu. Temari gasped. Gaara, stop it. Naruto yelled. Don't forget. Shino, who was still in the stands with the sand trio, could not understand why they were throwing such a fit. But their shouts actually worked and the sand loosened away and fell to the floor. Of course, Gaara shot them the deadliest death glare Shino had ever seen, but he listened. He really did not appreciate being told what to do, but the minuscule respect he had for his brothers and sister quelled his bloodthirst. For now. It's time, he thought, to try out another jutsu. Gaara slammed his hands into the ground and focused to the ground where Sasuke was. Morph. The dirt patch beneath Sasuke suddenly turned into a substance similar to quicksand and held him down just as a hand of sand ascended from the ground and made its way up to his neck and began to steadily choke the life from him. Die, spat Gaara. Naruto managed a shaky sigh of relief. This probably wasn't any better for Sasuke, but at least the plan wasn't being disrupted any further. Uchiha would probably die, but that wasn't a concern compared to the greater business that was to take place. Suddenly, the sand around Sasuke's neck loosened while the quicksand held steadfast. What? He shot a glance at Gaara, who was glaring up in the cage's balcony. Oh yay. He thought. K's cage has uses for Uchiha. And Gaara probably wouldn't go as far as kill Sasuke under his father's eye. Sasuke was breathing heavily and clutching his neck, but was, for the most part, alright. Too bad. There were feathers in the air, Sakura observed. Dozens and dozens of feathers. Was this an illusion or was it just her imagination? Kai. The pair of voices from her teachers alerted her enough so she managed a Kai before her mind became too mangled. Up in the towers, Sandaime-sama sensed something was amiss. He turned slowly and gave the cage a look. Cage turned his head slowly too. The two Wind Country attendants sprang into the air and detached a smoke bomb just as a group of Leaf Anbu dashed toward the towers. The operation had begun. Immediately, the sand began wrapping Gaara in a tightly packed sphere as before. Sasuke, who was standing parallel to the ground on the arena wall, was doing something with his hands, no doubt a jutsu. Naruto jumped on the railing. Oi, Kitsune. Got ye. He jumped down toward the ground headfirst, hoping, praying for success. The Kyuubi would regulate the chakra for him and he would do the seals. Somewhere deep inside him, a gate opened and chakra not his own poured out from his hands. Please work. All was going well, but then the chakra began to burn. That's too much. He yelled at the Kyuubi. I won't be able to control it. Spread your arms as far as ye can. He slammed his hands, palms down, into the ground as instructed, bounced off the force, and landed on his feet a few feet away. The pillars of light extended from the ground and formed the figures of two vague four-legged creatures. 2. What the dollar hashin? Shut up, kid. Kyuubi snapped. It's the best combination. Ye have enough power to control them both. I do. Naruto thought dubiously as the two Kyuubi forms strengthened and finally grew to around 6 feet of height each. They look like they're going to eat me alive. Look them in the eye and don't back down. Said it, they know fear when they see it and they'll refuse to serve one who has fear. It was surprisingly difficult. It might not seem an all-worthy task, but when you're facing two pairs of pits that have no mercy, not looking away is quite trying. Suddenly, the two stopped glaring and began running circles around him. What are they doing now? They're acknowledging ye for the time being. Hurry up and start doing your own job. The two sand attendants dashed headfirst toward the team of Anbu only to be sliced in half across the waist. Lee and RO team, shouted the captain as the cage jumped on top of the tower with a kunai aimed at the Hokage's neck, protect the ministers. If only they had looked back, they would have seen the each half of the two attendants come to life and jump on top the ceiling with the cages. Ninpu. Quad purple flame wall. A dark purple flamed wall was obstructed on the ceiling of the tower reaching up and scraping the sky. Each 4 of the attendants then created a barrier within the wall, effectively trapping the cages within the jutsu with no possible chance of escape or rescue. The Chidori crackled angrily under Sasuke's hand. In the previous fight, maintaining that speed took a lot of energy and Kakashi had estimated that Sasuke could only use the Chidori twice a day. Not that it mattered. He'd rip that sand shield off in one hit. He began a mad dash toward the sand ball in the middle of the field. Naruto smirked. This is when the jobs kicked in. Protect Gaara. He shouted at the two summons as Sasuke ran toward them at full speed. The Sharingan eyes widened at the sight of twin Kyuubis and the Chidori was slammed into the side of one of them. It dissolved on impact and Sasuke had to jump back as quick as possible to avoid decapitation. Then, the heel of someone's hand slammed into his face and knocked him off his feet. Sasuke winced and blinked. Naruto was standing between him and Gaara, trench coat abandoned. Your opponent is me, Uchiha-kun, said Naruto with enough edge to send chills down his spine. Let's go. Sasuke-kun. Sakura jumped down from the stands only to barely avoid being knocked over the head by Temari's fan. Then she had tip over backward to escape the base of the fan. This girl who was attacking her was nothing like the carefree person who crushed 10-10 effortlessly. She had eyes to kill. There was a rattling behind her and Karasu came out of nowhere and shot several knives at Sakura. They would have skewered her if Kakashi had not knocked them away. Sakura, Kakashi said, you. He stopped in mid-sentence to deflect a round of shurikens thrown by Kankuro. Go to the academy and inform the teachers. He said. They'll know what to do and follow their instructions to protect the village. Sakura nodded and rushed to obey her sensei. Can't let you do that. Temari yelled, expanding her fan and following her outside. Secretly, Temari was looking for an excuse to leave. She didn't want to be anywhere near Gaara when he transformed. A leaf was landed lightly on the ground seconds before it was unceremoniously trampled by the team of passing Anbu. The leader of the bunch caught and fell gracefully from one branch to the next, the rest following in his steps. Seconds later, 2 scouts caught up with them. Status: Hokage-sama is within Orochimaru's flame wall jutsu, reported one. And a fight is commencing in the stadium as we speak. The west gate is in need of assistance, said the second. The 3-headed snake is proving to be much more difficult than the guards can handle. The captain drew in a quick breath. The situation was certainly more dire than previously expected. Looked like the senior Chunins would have to handle evacuation by themselves. Head for the west gate. Sir. Fights continued to erupt from all sides of the arena. The most heavily concentrated one was, of course, at the center. An innocent passerby would have keeled over in shock at seeing the strange sight of people fighting all around a great dome of sand, some trying to get near it, and others doing their best to preventing the possibility of the former. Kakashi does not show mercy to enemies on the battlefield. If the opponent had been a brat genin fresh out of the academy, he would have dealt with him like he had with any other full-grown shinobi. And since Kankuro was a far cry from a brat genin fresh out of the academy, he would have been in big trouble if Baki had not come to his aid. Remember your mission. His instructor snapped swiftly. Oh yes, he was supposed to help defend the cocoon. But Naruto was doing a fine job of that, and he had a feeling that if he got too near the twin Kyuubi, they'd mistake him as the enemy and help rid him of much needed body parts. Kankuro, yelled Naruto, go help Temari. I've got things covered around here. He let out a breath. Leave it to Naruto to find him an honorable excuse to leave. Sasuke glared at Naruto. He's been glaring much more than usual lately and for some reason, it was always centered on him. He remembered Kakashi's words. How Naruto was, originally of the leaf. How he had left in a miraculous flight, evading a team that consisted of Konoha's best, both Kakashi and Itachi. When he was young, he didn't believe it, but now that he's fighting a person who had contributed to Itachi's darkness, he believed. Naruto was fast. His Sharingan kept up pretty well, but there was the ever-present nagging feeling that this was nowhere near Naruto's true speed. That time when Naruto fought Hyuga Hinata. Not even close. A fist came close enough to graze the side of his face, knocking Sasuke off balance and allowing Naruto a swift kick to Sasuke's opposing, unprotected side. He left Konoha. He thought, rage bubbling to the surface rapidly as he picked himself up. Just like. All fights were promptly brought to a halt as the ground suddenly began to rumble. Sakura was doing her best to try and lose Temari, but with little success. The sand girl was just too fast. She couldn't reveal the location of the academy, but she had to deliver her message. Suddenly, a wave was emitted from the stadium so powerful it knocked both girls off their feet. Temari, obviously distracted by the sight, did not notice Sakura taking this opportunity to sneak off. If that didn't warn the Chunin sensei, thought Sakura frantically, I don't know what will. Somehow, when Kankuro was told to leave, his luck led him straight to the bug-based shinobi who was probably smarting over the fact that he didn't get to fight in front of hundreds and hundreds of spectators. I thought we could have a match now, said Aburame Shino quietly. Kankuro threw a look back at the cocoon. It was beginning to shake. He really didn't want to be anywhere near it when it exploded, so he did the only thing he could and ran past Shino, who pursued closely. I'll take you on, bug boy. Kankuro thought, but only after I get the hell away from that thing. In all his years as a shinobi, Morino Ibiki never beheld what he was seeing now. The great dome of sand visible a mile away was trembling and growing at an alarming rate. Get reinforcements down to the stadium, he yelled, spit flying from his mouth. Something's happen. A wave, more violent than any ever felt before in the peaceful village erupted from the dome and the walls of the dome began cracking, marking the beginning of the end for the Fire Country's shinobi village, Konaha. Are you awake, Gaara? Yes. Go to sleep. Now. Yes, mother. There was a split second of peace, only a second. The entire world was still and no one moved. The children were silenced and the birds lost their voices. Then, like the calm before a storm, it shattered, throwing the world into chaos. Shukaku, not Gaara, was the one who awakened, much to the sand's dismay. There was at least a slight change that Gaara would listen to them. There was no earthly way possible to control Shukaku. Yahoo! Bellowed the demon, voice echoing all over Konoha. I'm free. Sasuke vaguely registered the growing horror on Naruto's face that mirrored his own. Fight completely forgotten, Naruto threw a look of confusion toward his instructor. Shukaku was only meant to come to life if something Gaara couldn't handle happened. The twin Kyuubi circled around Shukaku's body and came to a stop behind Naruto, as if grudgingly awaiting orders. Go to Temari. He said to them, never taking his eyes off the true demon. Assist her. They ran off just in time to avoid being trampled by the now rampaging demon. Who want a piece of this? Yelled the demon, pounding at his chest, ignorant of the presence of the many humans who had to scramble out of the way quickly to avoid being trampled. Shukaku tore into the village, splitting in the arena walls in the process. Who wants to die? Naruto, who retreated up the side of the wall still intact, knelt next to Baki. Shukaku was definitely doing more damage than the twin-headed snakes, that's for sure. He couldn't help but feel concern for Temari, who ran out a while ago and was now most likely in Shukaku's warpath, Kankuro too. What do we do now? He asked quietly. We can't do anything else. Baki replied curtly, lunging forward and deflecting a kunai aimed toward Naruto. Keep your guard up and stay alive, that's your goal now. Yes sir. Somewhere in the forest, Kankuro and Temari were locked in combat with Aburame Shino. After losing sight of Sakura, she happened to catch sight of Kankuro leading Shino into the forest and she had followed. Kankuro gave her the signal and they both dove into the air, leaving a confused bug boy behind to inhale the poison gas. We should probably head back. Temari finally said moments after the bomb was deployed. They're waiting. He hesitated for a split second, and then nodded in agreement. The two dashed back toward the heart of the battle, never noticing a cloud of black bugs regrouping and recreating the form of their master, who pursued the pair, taking care not to be noticed. Staying alive was much easier than avoiding death, decided Naruto. Luckily for him, the majority of the Leaf Junins who, he had to admit, no matter how grudgingly, were pretty damn strong, were occupied with Shukaku. Sadly, most the Leaf Junin like Hitaki Kakashi and Shiranui Genma who were already at the stadium in the first place remained within the stadium, thus changing the difficulty of avoiding death by very little. Suddenly, his back came in contact with another person's. He would have stabbed the person had she not said his name in a hurry. Kurosaki. Naruto-san, go see the battle between the cages. Now, I'll take care of things here. He glanced at her, confused. Was she seriously asking him to abandon a mission at its primary stage to go watch another battle? Why? Go. The urgency in her voice was evident. I said I'll handle things and I will. Please go now. And he went, not having a clue why she told him to go or why he was listening to her and going in the first place. Naruto worshipped the ground. Kazekage-sama walked on. He was the one who granted sanctuary when Naruto was on the run, he was the one who provided tutelage for Naruto to become a shinobi, and he was the one who gave Naruto a home and raised him, almost as his own. Kurosaki knew all that. That was why she had to send him to see the cage battle. The one fighting Sandaime Hokage was Orochimaru. Kage-sama was nowhere in sight. It didn't take a genius to figure out what happened. There was no way Kage-sama would allow such a grand-scale attack to be unmonitored, and Kage-sama was not the type to change the plan at the last minute. If Orochimaru had been masquerading as the Kage the whole time, there was even that slight chance that Kage-sama was already dead. Kurosaki had decided, mostly on impulse, that if Orochimaru was setting up the sand, she wouldn't let it slide by without at least trying something. Please do something, Naruto-san. As she had hoped, it didn't take Naruto a long time to realize that they'd been deceived. Orochimaru. You bastard. He thought savagely. You're. An ear-splitting shriek broke into his thoughts and nearly shattered his eardrums. Shukaku was somewhere at the southern end of Konaha, and there was a giant toad leading him away from the village and into the forest. And atop the giant toad was a person, an old man, the same old man who commented on his jutsu in the forest. It was that second when Naruto realized that the sand was doomed to defeat either way. What was he going to do? What could he do? Days from now, months from now, years from now, Naruto would reflect upon this decision as the most imbecilic and blockheaded one he's ever made. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. He remembered running faster than ever before and landing on Shukaku. The sand didn't register him as an enemy, so it didn't make a grab to suffocate, choke, or any of the other things it usually tried on invaders. When he was within range, after yelling out, "Gaara, wake up!" for the umpteenth time with no success, he went and punched Gaara in the face, waking him up, destroying Shukaku's spell, and dispersing the demon's body. He saw Orochimaru being carried out by the Sound 4. He saw the frog disappear. He saw Gaara hit the ground. Then darkness overtook him as his body came into contact with the ground as well, having fallen from 50 feet above. The invasion was over. The sand had lost. An inviolable cloud of gloom hung over the village of Sunagakur. The only chance of restoring the shinobi village to its former glory just slipped through their grasp forever. When Naruto awoke, it was dead silence. Even the forever restless sand was still, as if nature was mourning in its own way. Slowly, he got out of bed and headed downstairs. Temari and Kankuro were sitting rigidly at the kitchen table. Gaara was nowhere in sight. Temari gave Naruto a forced smile as he took the seat next to Kankuro. What's going on? He asked. They're having peace talks at the central office right now, said Kankuro flatly, dual meaning understood. The so-called peace talks were a load of bullshit. The sand village was over, finished. It would be destroyed, its ninja army relieved of duty, and they wouldn't be able to do a damn thing about it. The Leaf were just here to collect their dues. Yoshimaru left around 10 this morning. Kankuro said, fiddling around with Karasu. He said he'd be back around noon. Guess not. The clock now read 2. Where's Gaara? The two exchanged an uneasy look. He's been missing since the day after we brought him back, said Temari. I think he's mad that you punched him in the face. Silence. At least it was you who knocked him out, said Kankuro. If it was anyone else, they'd be dead by now. More silence. What happened after Gaara? Afterward. Orochimaru died even before Gaara went down. Then, catching herself, Temari hesitatingly added, Orochimaru killed Otou-san. Kurosaki was right. Aloud, he asked, what happened? Otou-san was murdered before the finals ever began. Before the order to summon a Kyuubi came. Orochimaru came in his stead and he was the one who fought the Hokage. After Gaara transformed, Sandaime did something that drained Orochimaru's soul. He'd seen the Hokage holding Orochimaru in place, but didn't recall a jutsu being performed at the time. Shukaku disappeared just when Kankuro and I came back. He used the bomb in Karasu and then we all had to flee Naruto. The blonde had risen to his feet and was headed toward the door. I have to find Gaara, he said quietly. But they're coming back soon. Keep him here until I come back, alright? And he was gone. It took him a little over half an hour to find Gaara. Naruto looked all over town until it finally struck him that Gaara just might be at the rooftops he spent every sleepless night at. His hunch was right, Gaara was sitting on the central office tower rooftop, like he'd been waiting this whole time. Conversation was, ironically, begun by Gaara. Once Naruto was within hearing range, he said quietly, "The leaf is demanding your return." Naruto blinked. Huh, Sandaime Hokage's last words concerned you, said Gaara. He wanted you to go back to Konaha. How do you know? Gaara nodded at the trail of sand that led down the stairway door. I heard them. Naruto's face fell. How's it going down there? Baki and Yashimaru are fighting a losing battle. Then there was that silence, which, no matter what the situation, was always comfortable. What will you do if you're forced to return? For once, Gaara was looking straight at him and not straight past him. What if you're not allowed to come back? He hadn't thought of that. In fact, right now, he had no idea what the hell he was thinking when he did what he did. He'd lost hope, the leaf was going to win, and he wanted leniency. So that's what it was. Cowardice. Gaara's voice broke into his thoughts. It'll be right, he said flatly. Whatever happens, it'll work itself out. Subtleness was never a key trait when it came to Gaara, but at the moment, flat-out remarks provided reassurance, even if only temporary. It was Gaara's own way of showing that he was forgiven. Thank you. The second the two walked in that evening, Temari knew that they knew. Baki and Yashimaru had put up a good fight, but in the end, their prime minister's refusal to assist them handed Naruto back to his homeland like a prize at a flea market. She had not been crying. There's been something in her eyes and nose since she heard the news, but she was not crying before they stepped in through that door. Afterwards, though, there was no denying that she was definitely bawling her heart out. She immediately ran up and threw her arms around her two Ototo and wailed. Naruto was also getting misty-eyed, and Gaara might or might not have been embarrassed of the emotional display at that moment. It was hard to tell, but he allowed himself to be of comfort to his older sister. Don't cry, Temari-san. Naruto said softly. It's not forever. They're not kicking me out of the village or anything, it'll be fine. I know, she said, pulling back. I know, but seeing you occasionally isn't the same as seeing you every day. Then, as if suddenly realizing the scene she made, Temari promptly excused herself. Yashimaru was in the kitchen throughout the first few minutes of Naruto's return. Despite his apparent apathy, Yashimaru was really going to miss that boy. No matter how incredibly stupid it sounded, the presence of Naruto alone calmed the demons of his mind. A decade ago, when he was ordered to murder Gaara, he refused it. Seeing Gaara happy, even if he was the murderer or his twin, made his heart forego a change. Yashimaru. It was Naruto, offering a weak smile. Ramen. That night, they all slept together in the living room, something they haven't done since they were 8 years old, when Kazekage-sama abolished the childish antics of his children. They talked long into the night, about everything from food to weapons. The subject of his departure was not touched. There was laughter, there were tears, and Naruto and Gaara stayed up long past the others, talking. When morning arose, Naruto was packed and Gaara was gone. You think he'd be here? Temari fumed as she fussed with Naruto's jacket. It's okay, Temari-ne. Naruto replied serenely. It's all right. Everything will be all right. You missed it, Kankuro said as he heard the familiar rush of sand. He's gone. I know, said Gaara tonelessly. The three siblings stared after the dust emitted by the carriage taking away their brother had long since disappeared. Finally, Gaara rose. We should go. It's raining. Temari glanced at her brother and started. There was a trail of water crawling down Gaara's face that was joined by another, and another. It was strongly suspected that Gaara wasn't even aware that he was crying. Yes, she said softly, let's go. There was once a little boy who changed the world. I should know, he changed mine.